Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, my loyal Cosimaniacs. This is your old friend, the Archfiend himself, the nefarious, the evil, the rude, the ill-mannered, the condescending Uncle Chuckie. Yes, I am all of the above, and that's why people love me. The agent of the Antichrist, the Archfiend himself. Well, and last week I kind of spoiled my public image, didn't I? Talking about unspeakable, horrible things. The skin crawls to even think about them. But such things happen. Oh, temporeo mores. Well, we're going to try and start getting back to what I love best, doing archfiendery. Well, actually, I'm not going to really talk about archfiendery directly tonight. I'm going to talk about one of the tools of it. One of the things that make Uncle Chuckie separate from everybody else in radionics. This thing. Right. This is the first helmet. This is where it all began. Well, not entirely, but at least as far as the psionic device. I'm going to give a little background. Uncle Chuckie is weird. You didn't know that, did you? Yes, I know I've shocked you with that statement, haven't I? Well, yeah. Even as a little kid, I was weird. And even from earliest childhood on, I cannot even go back to think about when I first started this. But I have had a thing about helmets, and in particular, the style with the crest and everything. I really like it. Now, when I was a kid in the 1950s, this was a very common thing in science fiction illustration. And I was very big into spacemen and things like that. Other kids played cowboys and Indians. We played, at least my friends were forced into playing Martians and Plutonians. Dressed better. What can you say? We dressed better. And so the helmet played a role. It was almost a mystical thing as I look back on it. I don't know why. Maybe it was some reincarnational thing from when I commanded Roman armies or something. I don't know. Commanded Roman armies. Yeah, right. Sure I did. Yeah. Delusions of grandeur time. But in any event, it's there. It always has been. You can see the thing in the background there. It's like, I just do that. Well, when I was a young man in my 20s, early 20s, I got the idea, because I was heavily into magic and everything, ceremonial magic, and turning the neighbors into toads and other such entertainments, of making the Fortunatus cap, which is basically, it was a hat that gave you magical powers of various types. I just like the name. Well, I didn't use an ordinary hat. There's nothing ordinary about me. I had a spare hard hat laying around. How I ended up with a hard hat is kind of weird, typical Uncle Chuckie. There was a big hardware store in town, and once I discovered that, I was in hog heaven, as the saying goes. Hardware, we must get hardware, yeah. And so I spent a lot of time, and I would find something interesting and pick it up because it was just interesting. Hard hat was one of them. So I have this hard hat. And because I was heavily into talismanic magic, I basically made 3 talismans, which I actually engraved onto aluminum foil circles and glued them to the hat, and they were to confer various psychic powers upon me when I put the hat on. It sort of worked. It could also have been purely psychosomatic. I mean, you believe this is going to work, you put it on, it works, right? How should I know? But I liked it. And so I got this thing about helmets, all right? Well, in those years, Kmart, of all places, sold these plastic shells for like $1 a piece. I bought a ton of them. I bought a ton of them. And I would make helmets, put things on them and crest and all that stuff. Got to be pretty good at it, actually. And then I had this one. The basics of it. The crest and this thing and these, this crest thing and these horns were actually 35 millimeter pill canisters. I didn't like it at all. I made this thing and what the hell did I make? God, put it away. Well, about a year after I made it, I built my first race on April 7th, 1977. Yes, the anniversary is Tuesday as of the making this. I built my first radionic box. And I decided, well, I should have some sort of head electrode to make a direct connection to this thing. And this is Uncle Chuckie we're talking about here. Yeah, me. Am I going to make just a headband with a couple of like dimes or act as electrodes on it like people did in those days? No. I'm going to make a helmet. Well, I've got this thing laying around. I'm not going to do anything with it. So I said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is if I can show it here, it's not very easy to see. This in here, they're covered with foil now. I put 2 foil electrodes, drilled a hole. Let's see if I can show it here. Where is the jack on here? I'm having trouble with this with the camera thing. Okay, right here. Drilled the hole, put the jack in. That actually was for a snap. This is what let's see, no, that's the snap. This is the jack, right. Okay, wake up, Chuck. And for the plug, and then I took some speaker wire. And again, I'm not sure how well any of this shows. It's really not important. But you can kind of see, well, now it's to the head electrode, but it went to the electrodes there. That was the helmet. There was nothing psionic about it. It was a glorified head electrode. And so I put the thing on. I went, okay, and it worked. I mean, I have told the story about when I first put the helmet on, and I ended up in the middle of the universe, and what the hell am I doing out here? Get me back home. Sure. But that wasn't good enough. About a year later, actually I tried another experiment with this thing. I tried putting an electrode in the center, and it's all covered with foil now. The reason for that is to protect my head because it's sharp, and it was kind of uncomfortable. I had basically a forehead electrode to replace those in the temple. Well, that wasn't a good idea at all. it was very, very uncomfortable. It was like there was this pressure here. You know, where my brain is all scrambled, where I fell on my head when I was 3 years old. You know, there was this pressure. It was like, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this. I'm not going to do it. I got to change that. And about that time, I encountered the works of Christopher Hills. And for those who aren't familiar, he was a radionics person. And he had an organization called the University of the Trees, who came up with his own publishing house called the University of the Trees Press. He came up with a whole bunch of kind of interesting gadgets. One of them was the magnetron. And I talk about that in my books a lot. If you've read any of my books, you're familiar with the story. It's a circle surrounded by other circles and these magnets. And I, in fact, even made kind of a homemade version of it just for the fun of it, see what would happen. And I thought, I wonder if I could adapt that to the helmet. So what I essentially did is as you can see from the inside here, you can see the foil circle real clearly. Okay, you can't see the magnets very well because they're hidden under the strap. But I basically made the sit right on top of the head, and then put the foil magnet strip in alternating polarities around the head. So essentially, magnetron you put on your head. Now, what do I do with these damn things here? Well, what I did, since I really couldn't run it, I wanted an antenna. Why? I don't know what I wanted. Couldn't really do much with this. At the time, I hadn't quite figured out how to fix that. Do that yet. So what I did is I took these off. I don't know if you can see. If you see next to the foil, just go up. Those wire coils. There were little wire coils under each. So now I've got a standalone device. Essentially, a psychotronic device I could wear on my head. It fit better back then. I've gotten fat since then, and yes, Uncle Chuckie's a fat head. Actually, I am blessed with the fact that I had a small head, so I could wear use these kids' helmets to experiment with because they were cheap. And that's how the helmet was born. And the thing is, you know, it's a very simple device, and that's why. And this is the basis of the helmets in the books. It doesn't need a tuner. It doesn't need anything fancy. It just does it with the magnetic field around your brain. That's all. Minor change in the magnetic field around the brain. But it works. It works. It's worked for, God, what is it now, 43 years? It's still my favorite. It really is. And that's the story of the helmet. How Uncle Chuckie turned a toy from Kmart into a device that could wreck the planet. Oh well, see, a little ingenuity. That's all it takes. And falling on your head doesn't hurt. So that's for tonight. Like I say, we're going to get back to normal here. No more lunatics and fools. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. It's going to be Uncle Chuckie and psionics. And that's more than enough. Anyway, health to you all. Be powerful and evil. This is Uncle Chuckie. Have an evil day.